Hello, welcome to The Accident. This is a series of videos that provides information to you about surviving a motor vehicle accident. I have two guests with me today who are going to be talking about how the family deals with accidents. But before I introduce them and give you some information about their situation, I'd like to talk about how the medical community deals with families and how families can deal with the medical community. A recent study that was published looking at what U.S. physicians think about the role of family in medical decision-making reveals that their interest is in three areas: giving priority to the patient's wishes and interest over the family's, valuing the process of informed consent, and last, paying attention to the patient's cultural backgrounds, whatever those may be. So those are the three focuses for physicians. Now, when we look at decision making and we look at family involvement, the family is and should be treated as a significant moral participant in medical decision making. So with that in mind, we have to balance out the needs of the physician and the medical system and the needs of the family, which is coming in contact with that. And here to help maybe explain how to deal with a motor vehicle accident and the issues that go with it is Maureen Howell and her son, Sam. And they're going to provide some information to us about how they, in their particular case, dealt with a motor vehicle accident. And maybe we can start with maybe Maureen, you and Sam, taking a few minutes to tell us about how Sam ended up in this situation.
Do you want to start, Sam? How did you have your accident?
On February 14th, 2005, I was going down M52 toward my house, and my cell phone made a little alarm noise, so I reached for it while I was going around the curve, and it snowed really bad the day before, and so I became airborne. And was not aware of that, of course, slammed on the brakes and all that. But to no avail, I was already on the route. So I rammed a tree 10 feet up in the air and then broke it off at that point. I flipped the car up and crushed the roof against the right side of my skull.
And Sam had fractures from the front of his head all the way around to the back, massive brain injury. Both of his lungs were crushed and deflated. He traumatized his heart, ruptured his spleen, crushed his pancreas, broke 3 cervical vertebrae and 1 thoracic, had a hematoma on his spinal cord, and was hurt very, very, very badly. How we found out about it, I was waiting for him to come home, and I talked to him maybe an hour before he was getting a chest x-ray. And I tried to convince him to come home, and he said, "No, Mom, I'll just get it done." And so it was Valentine's Day, and we were waiting to have dinner. And suddenly, I thought Sam had driven in the driveway, but I heard my husband just screaming. And I came out, and a sheriff was on the front porch that knew us and told us that Sam had been in a horrible accident and told my husband he wasn't going to survive. My hospital that I worked at was closed for patients because it was full. And so Sam was air flighted to our competitor, and it worked out just fine. It was Covenant Hospital that Sam ended up in. And it was the beginning of a nightmare for our family. It shook our family to the core. And it's something I had tried to imagine because I had been a trauma manager myself and a trauma nurse for a long time. And it's more horrific than you can even put your mind around, so you can't imagine the horror of it all.
And Sam, I imagine that after the accident, your recollection of the events is probably limited?
Actually, I have memory of the actual incident, but just before that, about 2 or 3 months I'm missing somewhere in my memory, and also for like, of course, the coma. I only remember dreams of my body understanding what was happening to it.
Sam told me a dream that he had. I started doing coma recovery right away in the intensive care unit. I'd put ice on his arms and feather his arms and cause him to move, and he had very little reflexes. His neurotesting showed absence of activity. He had no gag, no cough, no swallow, no scleral response if you poked him in the eye. Right pupil didn't respond, left responded sluggishly, and this was weeks after the incident. So he was not showing that his brain was going to do well. The prognosis on the part of all of the physicians and anyone caring for Sam was that he, at best, would be a vegetable and likely would not survive. It wasn't until 2.5 months after the incident that our intensivist, who was a wonderful doctor, told us that he would survive, and we had to start thinking about where we would place him after that.
So you were trying to tease his brain to do some things.
Yes.
And
yeah.
working with him.
I would put oils under, even though he had a tube going down his throat so he couldn't smell through his nose, the receptors can still receive stimulus. So I'd have oils, I'd put a little bit of saccharin taste on his tongue. I was doing everything I could to send information to his brain to wake it up. And I started that within a week of his intensive care, and I continue it until he woke up and after.
Okay.
And Sam told me one dream he had was that he was wearing shoes that were horribly tight and were killing his toes. And I said, son, that was me, because I couldn't get a pain response out of him, so I actually would use a pencil on his toes, and he would do a slight response. I wanted to send that message up to the brain and make sure it was received. And it was a wicked thing to do, probably, but it was the right thing to do to stimulate his brain. So he had recall of that within the coma. So.
Yeah, and that's an amazing visualization. Here you are outside his body, creating some kind of stimulation, and inside his brain, he's trying to make sense of it, and it turns into a dream in which he thinks he has tight shoes.
He also dreamt that he was shot. He was a police officer who was shot in a bank robbery. He had 7 chest tubes, and he'd never been injured in his life, so he didn't know what to make of it. He also dreamt that he was stabbed in the chest, right where his chest tubes were. So he wasn't receiving any kind of sedation because he was deeply in coma, but his brain was still operating on some level. So interesting to know.
Yeah, that's an amazing account of your accident. So let me ask you a few questions, and let's see if we can proceed down the road of helping people who are watching this learn a little bit of your experience, and more importantly, how family gets pulled into this process. What are the biggest challenges you see motor vehicle accident survivors having to deal with after the accident?
After the accident, still critically ill, are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Number one, they can't be their own advocate.
Okay.
In many cases, especially if there's a traumatic brain injury, they aren't responsible. Even if they don't have a traumatic brain injury, they're often on very high doses of pain medication and sedation to be able to make it through it. And so they are not able to be their own advocate, so someone needs to advocate for them. Unfortunately, not every family has a nurse or someone who has medical experience to speak for them. But nevertheless, as nurses and as medical professionals, I think it's really important that we remember that these people know this patient best, know best what makes them tick, knows best how to comfort, and need to be involved in their recovery. They most likely are the people that are going to go home with this patient and continue the care after you no longer have your hands on them. And so the more well-versed and trained they are in dealing with the issues that this patient faces, the better the outcome is going to be down the road.
Okay. Sam, any thoughts that you want to offer on that?
Yeah. One little shout out I have to make a mention of is to Dr. Owen Zachary Perlman. He's got to be, across the board, the best patient advocate in the medical professional system that there is.
That you've had experience
Yeah.
with.
So what you're saying is that you were fortunate to have a doctor who is a patient advocate first.
Who's on my side to begin with, you know.
Okay.
So anything that needed to occur, he was on top of it.
And I had the luxury, too, in intensive care to handpick my intensivist. It was someone I knew, and he listened to me and would, within reason, do what I wanted him to do. Sam suffered from pituitary failure, and I was doing nothing but research. I was rarely sleeping. And because of a little bit of research that I did in conjunction with something that happened with Sam's knee, it made me believe that his pituitary may have been affected, because 70% of the time on autopsy, on people who die in ICU from traumatic brain injury, the pituitary is either displaced or necrotic. And so there's that question, did they die from pituitary failure, which anyone will die from, or was it the brain injury that killed them? And Sam had been stable and then started to dive, and the doctor was willing to draw the labs that showed that he was in total pituitary failure, and they started IV replacement, emergency replacement of what he needed.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because the pituitary is just sitting encased in a little place, and
It's like a little box in.
Yeah, and it can slam into skull.
Oh, yeah.
It can move around. And,
Yes.
And just this little infundibulum is connecting it to the hypothalamus that controls it.
Yeah. Hypothalamus.
So,
Yeah.
well, it's the master gland, and if it's not
and
working,
it's
everything
not
else
very
is.
masterful
Yeah, when
in
it's-
all its glory.
Well, Sam has replacement of all the hormones that he needs,
Okay.
and has continued with those after that point, with the exception of growth hormone. Early on will kill you if you replace it.
To make up for the damage to the gland, there is now medication that's going into his body to help make up for that.
Right. So he sees an endocrinologist regarding that.
Very good.
Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing story, actually. And the fact that you're here
Yes.
is in itself a testimony to
So
medical
what
care.
can be done
What
if
can be
you
done.
go down the right roads?
The difficult thing with traumatic brain injury is, as if you're looking at it as a layperson, it's very difficult to see all that is available to help with recovery. From recovery after recovery, I guess. Once you get out of rehabilitation, it's difficult when you have unique little things occur. It's difficult to identify what is available for you, and not everybody knows.
Okay.
With Sam, he had difficulty with his swallow, and I noticed that his trach scar was stuck, and it ended up that he had revision of the trach scar and could swallow like that, and that was something he was never going to be able to do, according to the people that were caring for him. And then he ended up having food come out of his nose. So at that point, we realized that he had a weak muscle that normally closes off when you swallow or breathe, or when you swallow, your nose gets blocked off, and his wasn't working. So I'd seen a little research on using CPAP along with vocal exercises to cause that muscle to exercise, because there's no other way to do it.
So a little air pressure being applied.
And we did it, and
Made
did it,
that
and he
muscle-
hated it,
Yeah.
but we did it, and it fixed it.
Yeah.
So all those little things that
This-
aren't
this-
out there.
This reminds me of somebody who's like looking around for something back in their workshop that could fix something, and
yeah.
and that's what
I-
you're.
I patched them, I'm
There's
sorry.
even one
them together.
spot on the internet
Yeah,
where you can find each
It would be
thing
very nice.
that
yeah.
we needed to recover fully from this.
My
incident.
plan down the road when I'm not so busy is to do a primer on how to recover after recovery from a
Yeah.
TBI.
Well, I think that this is interesting that you're sharing with us how you were able to research while your son was in the hospital what could be done, and that you were able to work with a physician who was willing to.
His ego
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
like you normally would see. He's not threatened by other ideas or other input, and he's
Right.
very willing to say, well, let's check it out.
Yeah.
And wonderful man, Dr.
Yeah,
Al.
that's an interesting interplay. Okay, here's another question. What are the advantages of using case management or having a patient advocate in dealing with medical providers, family, third-party payers, and so forth, as you go through the whole process of recovery?
We do have a case manager that was provided by the insurance. She says it's the easiest job she's ever had because I'm on the job. And I had no idea about case management. I only worked in the ICU environment as a nurse, so I never had the opportunity to even see what case managers did. So a lot of it, I was already prepping while we were still in rehab, trying to leave, and not knowing that I even had access to a care manager. I was really ignorant of all of this. Anyway, she's been a very good friend, and she really believes in Sam getting better and is wonderful.
I'm
However,
willing to take the steps required to do such.
However, having said that, if you have someone who is not seeing your needs and not seeing the patient's needs and not treating the family as a whole, and is more working from the viewpoint of the insurance company, you do have the opportunity to hire your own case manager, and they are out there. And you don't have to stick with the first one you get if that doesn't work out for you, no more than you would with the first doc.
Sure. And I guess one of the things that case managers can do is provide some respite care, or because if you're on the job 7 and 24, you're going to get burned out, right?
Well, yeah, Jim and I, when we took Sam home,
Yeah.
we took him home a couple months early because we just felt he would be safer at home from infections and that type of thing. And our doctor said, Maureen, you need to have 3 nurses around the clock because Sam was still very acutely ill. And I said, because I only trust us. And so Jim and I did it. We gave up our careers, we gave up our life. We really lost many of our friends just because we couldn't operate in the same realm that they did anymore. You know, and we're still 24/7 with Sam. He's never alone. It's not safe for him to be alone yet. He's still working on some frontal judgment type things. And if his body is stressed, even from working out too hard, or definitely if he develops a fever, and for him a virus starting isn't just a 99-degree temp for him, it's a 103 or 104 temperature, and it's immediate. At that point, he needs IV steroid replacement. Normally, you can't do that in the home, but I can. I've been given the okay to do it. And so I've prevented him multiple times from having to land in the hospital and be exposed to whatever. He doesn't have a spleen, and he is on steroids, so his immunity is affected. It's better if he stays in a cleaner environment like home. Okay. And I think every patient is better at home as long as they have the support system they need.
Yeah, healthcare-acquired infections are a big issue.
It's a killer.
About 1.5 million people are affected by it each year in the U.S.
And he was colonized with Pseudomonas when he came home, and that's one of the reasons we brought him home. We wanted him to be able to recover.
Okay. And Pseudomonas, of course, is one of those things that you can find in tap water.
Absolutely. It can live in anything.
Can live in anything. So, okay. Let's look at the next question. How are TBI patients more of a challenge than other injured MVA survivors?
When your head is intact, no matter what type of disability you have, you can make judgments for yourself. You can control your life. You have independence. Even if you're in a wheelchair and can't move your arms and legs, you have independence. When you have a brain injury, you lose the ability to be independent to varying degrees. And Sam hasn't run into this yet, but people who have closed head injuries and are affected in their brain are called the walking wounded. They're able to walk, they're able to talk, they're able to do many of the things they used to do, and yet they're different. And their judgment is off, and their behavior is off, and they're not the same person they were prior to the accident, and may never be. And so they're more difficult in that regard.
Yeah. Sam, let me ask you this question. What kind of investment and dedication did you have to make to reach this current level of functioning?
I had to work as hard as I've ever worked in my life.
Me too.
Because I knew what the result of the work would be, and I knew that I had to do it in order to save both of our lives.
And you've gone back to school, and you're working on preparing yourself for even more ahead of you, right?
Yeah, I'm still planning on being a doctor. I mean, how many brain injuries can say that?
I don't know anybody at this point, but that's pretty remarkable.
He was #1 in his anatomy and physiology class, the first one, and I think #2 in the second. He did really well. But we weren't taking it for the class. We were just trying to see if he could learn new material, if his brain could. That's another thing, your ability to learn and remember. His memory is wonderful. He wasn't affected.
Uninjured. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I hope we can maybe see you in 10 years and see what
too.
progress you've made in the
Yeah.
next 10 years, because yours is an evolving story.
Well, I'll tell you, it took our whole family to make him get to where he was. His 2 sisters are incredibly devoted to him, and they're both teachers. And so when he first moved, it was on his dad's birthday, and it was just the toes on his right foot. And so we jumped on it. And so we were asking Sam all types of questions, and the girls had eraser boards, and they were saying what they looked at all the areas of his brain, and there were multiple that were badly injured, and what the results could be and what the deficits could be. And so they'd test. They'd draw faces and see if he'd see there was a missing nose and everything. And so Sam would do yes and no. Well, then after about a week of this constant barrage of questions trying to figure out if he knew everybody, and he did, he started having horrible muscle spasms in his leg. So he had to be put on strong medications to control it. We had to let him shut up for a while with his foot.
Okay.
And then my hand started up my right, and then slower, but up my left eventually.
And he and his dad are really, really good buds.
Yeah.
And as soon as they tease each other horribly, and as soon, his thumb didn't work right away, fingers did, but thumb, but as soon as he could go, he'd do that, and his dad like, hey, you, out of here.
Yeah.
And I remember all the way along thinking, oh, if only he could nod his head or shake, oh, if only he could say yes or no, because he didn't talk for 2 years. He used a letterboard. And I just always want him to do more. And I'm not none of us are putting any kind of ceiling on Sam. It's like, you do what you can, buddy. And we work.
There's no limit.
No.
Just work as hard as you can.
And he
to
works
get what
very
you
hard.
can.
And so do I, and so does my husband.
Yeah.
We work hard.
Now, and I want to mention your husband was a state legislator.
Yeah.
And since then has become a very outspoken person, an advocate for people with motor vehicle accident injuries, and in fact is probably the voice for people like Sam and
Absolutely.
others.
With I know they're attempting, the insurance companies are wanting to make changes in no fault, and so there is a bill right now that's out on the House floor to cap the benefits. Now Sam has already used $3 million, and he's only 25, and they're wanting to start the coverages at $500,000. Sam used $500,000 in about 3 weeks.
Okay.
And we're very concerned about this happening. Michigan has the very best no-fault lifetime coverage for people who are in this condition. And I'm so afraid, we're all afraid that the very young and poor are going to be the people who buy the lower levels and find themselves
then die,
or
Yeah,
in nursing homes.
Yeah, because I guess when we look at insurance, we all buy insurance so that if my son's in a horrible accident like this, all the people who don't need it will help pay for his care.
Right.
And that's the way it should work, right?
And Sam will be grandfathered in. So
spread out over a larger amount of
right
people.
now,
Sure.
it costs us
And
each.
it costs less for each one.
It's $149 per car at this point for catastrophic.
Right.
The rest of it, a lot of it, is collision. That's a huge part of your insurance billing. And there are things they could do about collision, capping-wise. Don't cap people, cap repairs on cars if you need to lower the insurance rates.
Well,
Don't
I
do it
mean,
to people.
you're right there, that people are a higher priority and should be.
Absolutely.
And
Huge.
$149 to protect a person
How much is that a day?
catastrophic for a lifetime is probably a great investment.
It is a wonderful investment. Michigan, by other states, they hold Michigan up as the example of how to do it right.
Yeah.
Milliken did this, and it was a genius idea.
Yeah.
Very smart.
Well, we know that families working together make more impact than a person being alone. And Sam, you're a good example of that, because it sounds like everybody in your family who could took time to work with you.
Yes.
How does that make you feel?
Started out at the very beginning, each and every one.
Mm-hmm.
From my mom, dad, sisters, everyone.
In-laws, I mean, cousins, everyone was together in this for Sam.
And I'm saying that this is an example, this is a best practice example of if there's somebody in your family who's had a traumatic motor vehicle accident, that you should probably do what your family did, which is get together and figure out how collectively you could all work together to help that person recover.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a very good example.
The sad thing is that had we not had the no fault, Sam would have had to have been in a nursing home. They wouldn't let him go into rehab. Even Blue Cross wouldn't, at the level that he was.
And at the level I was at, I wouldn't have gotten the brain stems or woken up or returned to society
a week
as
after-
a critical part.
Yep. A week after entering rehab, after beginning the brain stimulants, Sam woke up. And he'd been in a coma for 3 months with horrible bears and Sarah's, well, brain testing, and just a very, very bad prognosis. And then he woke up, and it all continued from there.
And you're saying the brain stimulation wouldn't have happened if there wasn't
Not in a
fault.
not in a nursing home. My husband went to the top of Blue Cross, and they said, "Sorry, you can't go to rehab. He's not at a level he can. Only a nursing home." Medicaid would have paid for a nursing home, not rehab. So he would have missed out on having doctors who are trained in treating brain injury. He would have been in a nursing home where they would have turned him every 2
also,
hours.
essentially, you don't get rehab if you've had a traumatic brain injury, because at the same level of ability that they dismiss you from rehab, the Blue Cross will send you there.
Yeah, you have to be walking and talking and confused where you can work for at least 4 hours a day for Blue Cross or Medicaid to allow you to enter rehab. And how many brain injuries are like that when they need to go to rehab? They aren't. That's when rehab facilities start to discharge out to outpatient rehab. And they only give you 3 months of outpatient rehab.
So
And
you
I
don't
guess-
get it.
Yeah,
I guess the point here is that with a case like yours, Sam, you're going to need rehab for 10, 15, 20 years.
as
but-
long as he progresses.
Yeah.
As
And you're
long
gonna
as
benefit.
I make steps toward where I want to be, I'll have it as long as I need it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we're going to have to wrap this up here. I do want to thank Sam and Maureen Howell for sharing your story with us, and also pointing out how important the family can be in recovery, and also that with regards to issues like traumatic brain injury, the level of care that is provided really does have an impact on whether a person recovers, and in your case, Sam, has a future.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
I want to
certainly.
thank the people that have been watching this also, and I hope you watch the other videos in this series about the accident and share these with other people so that you can learn and hopefully see an improvement for yourself if you're involved in situations like this, or for people. And don't forget your other family members. If they've got an issue like this, see if you can be of help. More than likely, you're going to be surprised to find out that you can, as is the case here with Maureen's family. Thank you very much, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you.